There are 7 world leaders that perfectly embody the 7 deadly sins, starting off with pride. Pride is defined as an excessive and vicious love of one's own excellence. It's a sin that convinces a person that they're always right, that they're untouchable, and that the rules don't apply to them. There's been many prideful leaders.
You know, Putin said Donald Trump is a genius. Putin called me a genius, by the way.
But none embody the sin as well as Saddam Hussein. Saddam Hussein was so obsessed with himself that when he came into power in 1979, he didn't just want to be Iraq's president. He wanted to become its symbol. His face was everywhere. He had statues of himself erected all over the city. Giant portraits of himself were hung in government buildings, schools, airports, and even the highways. It was impossible for a person living in Iraq to go a day without seeing his face. It didn't stop at the pictures though. He compared himself to ancient kings like Nebuchadnezzar II, convincing himself that he was the heir to Iraq's greatest rulers. He built palaces all over the country, while his people suffered the effects of sanctions and war. But just like any prideful person, there usually comes a fall. In 1990, Saddam Hussein ordered the invasion of Kuwait, believing he could seize the country without any retaliation. His pride made him heavily underestimate the scale of the response he would get. A coalition of over 30 countries declared war against Iraq, forcing Saddam Hussein to retreat, leaving his country more isolated than ever. Even after years of sanctions, he refused to step down, remaining defiant even during the US invasion of Iraq until his government collapsed. Greed is defined as a selfish and excessive desire to have more of something, usually money. It makes a person take until everyone else has nothing. Mobutu Sese Seko is what happens when greed manifests in a human being. When he seized power in 1965, he made promises to maintain stability. Instead, over the next 3 decades, he transformed one of Africa's most promising countries into a symbol of corruption. Zaire was overflowing with natural resources, ones that would have made it one of the richest countries on earth. Instead, much of the wealth flowed into one man's pockets. While the country's roads were crumbling, Mobutu was diverting billions of dollars from the state into his personal account. He built a lavish lifestyle while hospitals ran out of medicine. People watched as their years of hard work fund Mobutu's personal life. By the time he was overthrown in 1997, the economy had collapsed under decades of mismanagement. A country blessed with an abundance of natural resources was stripped of its potential because of one man's greed. Sloth is defined as an extreme lack of effort. It's failure to act even when the world around you is crumbling. By the early 1900s, Russia was on the brink of collapse. There was no food, everyone was protesting, and the economy was struggling. Yet Nicholas II sat comfortably in his palace, repeatedly dismissing the crisis, convinced that the monarchy would weather the storm. But no one likes reluctant leaders. By 1917, people finally had enough. Protests erupted all over Petrograd, and soldiers refused orders from above. The government collapsed while Nicholas II watched. He and his family were imprisoned and executed, with his empire vanishing simply because of his inability to act. Gluttony is defined as the overindulgence and overconsumption to the point of waste. People usually think of gluttony in relation to food, but it's simply an inextinguishable hunger for more. Jean Bedel Bokassa is the embodiment of gluttony. After he seized power in the Central African Republic, being just a president wasn't enough for him. Heavily inspired by Napoleon, he declared himself emperor and organized one of the most lavish coronations for his time. A coronation that costed $20 million, a large sum of money for a country that was one of the poorest in the world. He drained the state's resources while his citizens couldn't even afford healthcare and education. Millions of people suffered because of one man's inextinguishable hunger for more. But while one man had a hunger for a more extravagant life, another had a hunger for something else. Lust is defined as a strong and passionate sexual desire or craving for something. When desire becomes obsession, people lose sight of everything else. For Silvio Berlusconi, power and sexual controversy were two sides of the same coin. As one of Italy's most influential politicians, he dominated the landscape for years. but that's until allegations concerning his private life began to surface. Parties, also known as Bunga Bunga parties, induced years of investigations into his private life. The parties became public knowledge in 2010 after Berlusconi intervened with police to release a detained 17-year-old Moroccan nightclub dancer known as Ruby the Heart Stealer. Even though he claimed that the parties were respectable dinners, investigators and witnesses described them as hedonistic parties where female guests would striptease and perform sexual acts. His career eventually came crumbling down when allegations involving young underage women dominated headlines all over the world. Wrath is defined as extreme violent anger or strong desire for revenge and punishment. Anger so consuming that it destroys everything around it. Few leaders have ever exhibited a level of wrath that rivals that of Adolf Hitler. A man driven by so much hatred and a desire for revenge after Germany's defeat in World War I. When he came into power as Chancellor in 1933, he made his hatred into law. He persecuted entire communities of people because of who they were, using conspiracy theories to justify what he was doing. The invasion of Poland ignited the deadliest conflict in history, resulting in the deaths of tens of millions of people over the next 6 years. At the same time, Nazi Germany carried out the systematic massacre of over 6 million Jews, justifying his actions using anti-Semitic conspiracy theories, claiming that the Jews were responsible for Germany's downfall. Even when defeat was at his doorstep, he refused to surrender, resulting in the death of even more people and the collapse of his own nation. Envy is the painful feeling of wanting what other people have. It's not always about what other people have, but the fear that someone might take what you have. By the 1930s, Joseph Stalin had become the undisputed leader of the Soviet Union. He had so much power in his hands, but that power did anything but bring him peace of mind. It just made him paranoid. In Stalin's mind, anyone who had any kind of influence or popularity could come and take his spot, so they had to disappear. Generals, government officials, and even his own friends fell victim to Stalin's envy. Between 1936 and 1938, he held what's known as the Great Purge, where hundreds of thousands of people were executed and sent to prison camps under suspicion of being spies or political rivals. Ironically, many of the people who had been persecuted had helped build the Soviet Union. But that success is what made Stalin paranoid. This was a case where other people's success made Stalin insecure, no matter what he achieved himself.